Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to break down something that feels, well, huge and complicated, but actually hits you every single day. We're talking about the global economy, and you're about to see how it all connects, from the phone in your pocket to the price of your groceries. So let's just jump right in with a question like this. It sounds kind of crazy, right? How can some decision made in Washington, D.C. make you pay more for gas thousands of miles away? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today by looking at the invisible strings that tie all of us together. Okay, so to even begin to answer that, we've got to start with the absolute basics. What exactly is this thing we call the global economy?
Think of it like this. The global economy is basically this massive, tangled web. Every country is a part of it, and they're all linked by a constant flow of stuff. Goods, money, and even people. The days of a country existing in its own little bubble, they're long gone. We're all in this together.
And here's a perfect example that makes this whole idea real. I mean, just look at the phone that's probably in your hand or pocket right now. An iPhone. The idea, the design, that happens in the USA. But the really high-tech bits, the screen, the computer chips, those are made by specialists in South Korea and Taiwan. And then all those parts are shipped to the world's factory, China, to be put together.
And that right there, that just perfectly sums up the core idea. One single product is the result of a global dance across continents. And look, this isn't just about iPhones. It's the same story for our cars, our clothes, even the food we eat. That's the global economy in action. All right, so like any big story, the global economy has its main characters, the big players whose every move sends ripples across the entire world. So who are they? You can pretty much boil it down to these three heavyweights. First, you've got the USA. Its power comes from two things, its massive consumer market, and of course the almighty US dollar. Then you have China, the world's factory, basically. And finally, there's Europe, which acts as a huge stabilizing force and sets the rules for a lot of things, from data privacy to environmental standards. And here's the kicker. They're all deeply connected. If American consumers suddenly stop buying stuff, Chinese factories grind to a halt. If a big crisis hits Europe, the entire global financial system gets shaky. It's like they're three engines on the same plane. If one of those engines starts to sputter, the whole plane is in trouble. Okay, so I mentioned the US dollar, and we really need to dig into this because it is without a doubt one of the most important pieces of this whole puzzle. What gives this one currency so much power over everyone else? Well, the dollar's dominance really comes down to a few key things. For starters, really important stuff, like oil, is bought and sold in dollars, period. Second, most big international loans and business deals are done in dollars. And third, whenever there's chaos in the world, investors rush to the dollar because they see it as a safe place to park their money. All this makes it the world's reserve currency. It's the main currency that central banks everywhere keep on hand. And this has huge, huge real-world consequences. When the U.S. central bank raises interest rates, the dollar gets stronger. For other countries, that means the oil they need to import suddenly costs way more in their own currency. And for a poorer country that took out loans in dollars, their debt can suddenly become crushing overnight. And get this, it's through no fault of their own. So this naturally leads us to the tools that governments and central banks use to try and steer their economies. You hear these words on the news all the time: inflation, recession, and interest rates. They're all part of a very delicate and often painful chain reaction. Let's walk through how this usually goes down. First, you get inflation. That's when prices for everything just keep going up. To fight that, a central bank will raise interest rates. The idea is to make borrowing money more expensive, which should cool down spending. But there's a huge catch. When loans get expensive, businesses stop expanding and hiring. People cut back on spending. The result? The economy slows down, jobs disappear, and you run the risk of a full-blown recession. It is an incredibly difficult balancing act. All right, so we've been talking about these big, abstract ideas. But let's get down to it. What does any of this have to do with you? Why should you actually care? Oh, it affects you directly, believe me. Remember that rising petrol price we talked about right at the beginning? Yep, that's the strong dollar in action. The price of your groceries, a lot of which are probably imported. Same deal. Whether local companies are hiring people or laying them off often depends on how much stuff they can sell overseas. And of course, if you have any investments or a retirement fund, you know the stock market is basically a mood ring for the global economy. So here's the bottom line. It might feel like it's happening a world away, but a global problem always becomes local pain. It's not just abstract numbers on a screen. It's the real feeling you get in your wallet and in your community.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What does the future of this whole system even look like? Because the world we just described isn't sitting still, it's changing fast, with massive new challenges and trends popping up all the time.
Well, there are a few massive shifts you're going to want to keep an eye on. Some countries are actively trying to use the dollar less. It's a slow process called de-dollarization, but it's happening. Then there's AI, which is on track to completely change the kinds of jobs that are available. We're also seeing companies move their factories out of China to new places like India and Vietnam. And underneath all of this is a problem that won't go away, the widening gap between the rich and the poor, which puts a strain on everything.
And that really brings us to the final, most important takeaway. Understanding the global economy isn't just some boring topic you read about in a textbook. It's about understanding the invisible forces shaping your world. Because at the end of the day, this giant, complex system is the thing that's quietly deciding your salary, your job, and the kind of life you can live.